6:47 a.m., the janitorial staff entrance. A woman in her late 30s pushed through the back door of Apex Industries headquarters, badge scanning with a quiet beep that nobody noticed. Her uniform was perfectly ordinary. Navy blue coveralls, worn sneakers, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Nobody looked twice. Nobody ever did. That was exactly the point. What the executives sipping their morning coffee upstairs didn't know was that this janitor was actually Elena Rodriguez, the majority shareholder and CEO of their own company. And she'd been watching them every single day. For 3 weeks, she'd seen things that made her blood boil. I wonder where you're watching this story unfold from today. Perhaps you're in a corporate office somewhere, dealing with your own workplace challenges. Maybe you're in New York, Los Angeles, or a small town in the heartland. Wherever you are, you've probably witnessed workplace injustice before, but rarely does someone have the power to do what Elena was about to do. The decision. 3 months earlier, Elena Rodriguez sat in her corner office on the 42nd floor, staring at a folder that shouldn't exist. Inside were complaints, dozens of them, filed by female employees over the past 2 years. Complaints about harassment, discrimination, hostile work environment. Complaints that had mysteriously never reached her desk. Elena had built Apex Industries from nothing. 15 years ago, she'd started with a laptop and a dream in her studio apartment. Now, the company employed over 3,000 people and generated $800 million in annual revenue. She'd taken it public, survived the 2008 crash, and built a reputation as one of the most ethical CEOs in tech. Or so she thought. How did these never reach me? Elena asked Margaret Chen, her head of HR, who'd brought her the folder after her own investigation. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she answered. Your executive team has a system. Complaints get filtered through VP Marcus Blackwell's office first. He decides what's worth your time. Elena felt her stomach drop. Marcus Blackwell, her vice president of operations, the man she'd promoted 3 years ago based on his impressive results and charismatic leadership. The man who claimed to share her values. And what happens to complaints he doesn't think are worth my time? Elena already knew the answer, but she needed to hear it. They disappear. Sometimes the complainant is transferred. Sometimes they're pressured to resign. Sometimes they're just fired. Elena opened the folder and began reading. Sarah Kim, senior engineer, repeatedly passed over for promotion after reporting sexual comments from her manager. Jennifer Walsh, marketing director, demoted after refusing to laugh at offensive jokes in meetings. Maria Santos, executive assistant, terminated 2 days after filing a discrimination complaint. The list went on and on. I need proof, Elena said quietly. Real proof, not just complaints. I need to see it happening. Margaret nodded. I thought you might say that, which is why I didn't tell you the worst part yet. There's worse? I've been quietly interviewing people, not just the women who filed complaints, but janitors, cafeteria workers, maintenance staff, the people who are invisible to the executive team. Margaret pulled out her phone and played a recording. A man's voice, definitely Marcus, laughed loudly. You know what the problem is? These diversity hires. They're not qualified, but we have to pretend they are because of some woke board policy. Give it time, they'll wash out on their own. Another voice joined in. Or we help them along. More laughter. Elena's jaw tightened. When was this recorded? 2 days ago. Executive lunch. The janitor was cleaning nearby. They didn't even notice her. That's when Elena made a decision that would shock her board, her family, and every business publication that covered her. She was going undercover. The transformation. Elena Rodriguez disappeared for exactly 1 week. Officially, she was on a meditation retreat with no phone access. In reality, she was preparing for the most important role of her life. She rented a small apartment in Queens under a false name. She bought cheap clothes at a discount store. She changed her hair, darker, simpler. She practiced speaking differently, softer, with more hesitation. She studied how to blend in, how to become invisible. Most importantly, she worked with Margaret to create a bulletproof identity. Maria Gonzalez, age 38, previous experience in commercial cleaning, recently moved to the city, needed work. The hardest part wasn't the physical transformation. It was reading through the full reports Margaret had compiled. 23 women had filed complaints in the past 2 years alone. 23 careers damaged or destroyed. And at the center of it all was Marcus Blackwell, protected by a circle of executives who either participated in the toxicity or looked the other way. Elena had spent 15 years building a company based on respect, innovation, and integrity. And her executive team had turned it into something she barely recognized. On Monday morning, she walked through the janitorial entrance for the first time. The security guard barely glanced at her badge. She was just another cleaner. Invisible. Exactly as planned. The first week, Elena's supervisor was a tired woman named Rosa, who'd worked at Apex for 12 years. She assigned Elena to the executive floor, the worst floor, as Rosa called it. "They treat us like furniture," Rosa explained as they took the service elevator. "Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. And if someone is rude, just smile and say, 'Yes, sir,' or 'Yes, ma'am.' It's easier that way." Elena nodded, her mind already racing. This was her company. She'd created policies specifically to ensure respect for all employees, but policies meant nothing if the culture was rotten. Her first encounter with Marcus happened on day 2. She was emptying trash bins in the open office area when he walked by with his team, talking loudly. "The problem with Elena, the CEO, he said with exaggerated formality, is that she's too soft, too worried about feelings. If I were running this place, we'd cut the dead weight and actually make some money." One of his associates laughed. "You basically do run it. She just signs what you put in front of her." Marcus grinned. "True. But between us, when she finally steps down, and she will, she's getting pressure from the board, I'm positioned perfectly to take over. Then we'll really clean house." Elena's hands gripped the trash bag tighter, but she kept her face neutral. They were talking about her like she was a puppet. Worse, they were planning to force her out of her own company. She moved to the next bin, staying invisible. Over the next week, she witnessed things that would have seemed impossible in her company. She saw Marcus berate a junior analyst to tears over a minor formatting error in a presentation. She watched a senior manager take credit for a woman's idea in a meeting, while that woman stood silently nearby, knowing she couldn't speak up. She overheard conversations that made her sick, jokes about which new hires were attractive enough to keep around, rankings of female employees based on appearance, casual dismissals of anyone who raised concerns about work-life balance or fair treatment. And through it all, she cleaned, emptied trash, wiped down conference tables, stayed invisible. But Elena wasn't just observing, she was documenting. A small camera disguised as a button on her uniform captured video. A recording device in her cleaning cart picked up audio. Every incident, every conversation, every piece of evidence was being stored securely off-site. The breaking point. The moment that changed everything happened on a Thursday afternoon in week 3. Elena was cleaning the women's restroom on the executive floor when she heard someone crying in one of the stalls. She waited quietly, unsure if she should leave or offer help. The door opened and a young woman emerged, mid-20s, eyes red and puffy. Elena recognized her. Jessica Park, a software engineer who joined the company 6 months ago. She'd been one of Elena's personally approved hires, a brilliant Stanford graduate with incredible potential. "Are you okay?" Elena asked softly, breaking Rose's rule about not speaking. Jessica looked startled, then embarrassed. "I'm fine. It's been a tough day." Elena handed her a paper towel. I'm Maria. I've worked here a few weeks now. If you need someone to listen, I'm good at keeping secrets. Maybe it was the kindness in Elena's voice. Maybe Jessica was just desperate to talk to someone. Whatever the reason, she started talking. I made a mistake, Jessica said, her voice shaking. I reported my manager for inappropriate comments. I thought this company was different. The CEO always talks about integrity and respect, but now they're trying to get rid of me. Elena felt ice in her veins. What do you mean? They're building a case, claiming my performance isn't meeting standards, even though my reviews have been excellent. My manager told me, off the record, that I should resign before they fire me. He said it would look better for future employment. That's illegal, Elena said carefully. Jessica laughed bitterly. Who am I going to report it to? HR? They work for him. She meant Marcus. The CEO. She's unreachable. And even if I could get to her, everyone says Blackwell runs this company anyway. Elena wanted to tell her the truth right there, that she was the CEO, that this would be fixed, but she couldn't. Not yet. She needed all the evidence, needed to see the full scope of the corruption. Don't resign, Elena heard herself say. Not yet. Things might change sooner than you think. Jessica looked at her with confusion but nodded. Thanks, Maria. You're kind. After Jessica left, Elena stood alone in that bathroom, looking at her reflection in the mirror. The janitor's uniform, the simple ponytail, the face people looked past without seeing. She'd seen enough. It was time to end this. The emergency meeting. On Friday morning, every executive at Apex Industries received an urgent message. Mandatory board meeting, Monday, 9 a.m., conference room A. Subject, critical company restructuring. No exceptions. The board of directors. Marcus Blackwell read it with mild annoyance. Another meeting. Probably about quarterly numbers or some new diversity initiative the board wanted to push. Whatever. He'd handle it like he handled everything else. Nod along, then do what he wanted anyway. He had no idea that Elena had spent the weekend preparing the most devastating presentation of her career. Every recording, every document, every piece of evidence carefully organized into an undeniable case of systemic harassment, discrimination, and fraud. Margaret Chen helped her prepare. So did the company's outside legal counsel, who'd been quietly reviewing everything. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus hadn't just created a toxic culture. He'd also been involved in financial irregularities, using company resources for personal gain and pressuring vendors for kickbacks. On Monday morning, Elena arrived at the office at 6:45 a.m., as usual, through the janitorial entrance. She changed in a private bathroom into a black suit she'd kept hidden. Professional. CEO-like. For the first time in 3 weeks, she looked like herself. At 8:55 a.m., she walked into conference room A through the main entrance. The entire board was already seated. So were Marcus and his inner circle of executives, 8 people in total who'd either participated in or enabled the toxic culture. Marcus was laughing at something on his phone when Elena walked in. He glanced up, did a double take, and his face went pale. What? Maria? What are you doing here? Elena didn't smile. She walked to the head of the table, set down her laptop, and connected it to the projection screen. Then she spoke for the first time in her real voice, with her real authority. My name isn't Maria. It's Elena Rodriguez, and I'm the CEO of this company. The reveal. The room exploded into chaos. Marcus stood up, his face cycling through shock, confusion, and then anger. This is a joke. Elena's been gone for weeks. I've been here every single day, Elena interrupted, her voice cold and controlled. For 3 weeks, I worked as a janitor on this floor. And I documented everything. She clicked a button on her laptop. The screen came alive with footage. First clip, Marcus berating a female analyst, calling her incompetent and a diversity hire mistake. Second clip, a group of executives laughing about which female employees they found attractive, ranking them like objects. Third clip, Marcus explicitly telling a manager to make life difficult for an employee who'd filed a harassment complaint. The footage kept playing. Audio recordings, email evidence, financial documents showing Marcus's kickback scheme, a comprehensive pattern of harassment, discrimination, and fraud. Marcus's face went from pale to red. "You can't. This is entrapment. Illegal recording. I'll sue you for—" "You'll sue no one," said Richard Morrison, the head of the board, his voice grave. "We've had legal review every piece of this evidence. It's all admissible. More importantly, it's all true." Elena turned to face Marcus directly. "For 3 weeks, I watched you destroy people's careers. I watched you create a culture of fear and toxicity in a company I built on respect and integrity. I watched you treat good people, including me, when you didn't recognize me, like they were invisible, like they didn't matter." She turned to the other executives, her gaze moving to each face. "Some of you participated. Some of you just looked the other way. Either way, you're done here." Marcus tried one more time. "The shareholders will never approve this. You're destroying company morale. This will tank our stock price." "I am the majority shareholder," Elena said quietly. "And the other shareholders have already been briefed. They're appalled, as they should be." She looked at the board chairman. "Richard?" Richard Morrison stood up, holding a folder. "Marcus Blackwell, you are terminated for cause, effective immediately. Your employment contract is void due to the fraud and harassment we've documented. You'll be escorted from the building by security, and we will be pursuing legal action for the financial irregularities." He turned to the other 7 executives. "The rest of you have a choice. Resign today with severance, or wait for the termination process. Either way, you're gone." The aftermath, the news hit fast. By Tuesday morning, every major business publication was running the story. Tech CEO goes undercover, exposes toxic culture in her own company. The response was overwhelming. Current employees reached out to Elena personally, sharing their experiences and thanking her for taking action. Former employees who'd been pushed out came forward, eager to tell their stories now that they knew someone would listen. Jessica Park, the young engineer Elena had met in the bathroom, sent her a message. "I knew there was something different about you, even as Maria. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for caring." But Elena's work wasn't finished. Firing the toxic executives was just the first step. She needed to rebuild the culture from the ground up. She started by personally meeting with every person who'd filed a complaint, all 23 of them. Some had left the company, but she offered them their jobs back with apologies and compensation for what they'd endured. Many accepted. She implemented new policies, an independent ethics hotline, mandatory anti-harassment training for all employees, especially leadership, regular anonymous culture surveys, and a commitment to transparency in all promotion and hiring decisions. Most importantly, she changed how the executive team operated. No more filtering complaints. No more gatekeeping access to leadership. She instituted open door days where any employee could schedule time with her directly. The financial impact was significant. Stock price dropped 12% initially as investors worried about the instability. But within 6 months, it had recovered completely as the company's reputation improved and employee retention soared. Elena also made another change. Once a quarter, she still worked a shift as Maria, the janitor. Not to spy, but to stay grounded, to remember what it felt like to be invisible, to ensure that the people who kept the building running felt valued and seen. The unexpected consequence. 6 months after the purge, Elena received a visitor in her office. a woman in her 50s, dressed professionally with a nervous energy. "Miss Rodriguez, I'm Patricia Langford. I worked at Titan Corp." Elena recognized the name. Titan Corp was Apex's biggest competitor, another major tech company. Patricia continued, "I saw what you did, how you went undercover, how you cleaned house, and I need your help." She pulled out a folder. It looked familiar. Complaints, dozens of them. "I'm the VP of HR at Titan, and we have the same problem you had, maybe worse. But our CEO doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm exaggerating or that people are too sensitive." Patricia's voice cracked slightly. "People are suffering, and I don't know what to do." Elena looked at the folder, then at Patricia. She thought about those 3 weeks in the janitor's uniform, the things she'd seen, the people she'd met, the injustice she'd witnessed. And she realized something. This wasn't just about Apex Industries. This was about a much bigger problem. A culture of toxicity that existed in countless companies, protected by executives who either participated in it or didn't want to see it. "Tell me everything," Elena said. The legacy. A year after her undercover experience, Elena Rodriguez stood at a podium in front of 500 business leaders at the National Business Ethics Conference. Her speech was titled, "When Leaders Stop Looking." "I built a company based on values I believed in," she told the audience. Respect, integrity, opportunity for everyone, regardless of gender, race, or background. "I wrote those values into our mission statement. I talked about them in every board meeting. I thought that was enough." She paused, letting the silence build. It wasn't enough. Because while I was in my corner office writing mission statements, my executives were creating a culture of fear and harassment. And I didn't see it because I wasn't looking. Not really. Not where it mattered. She told them about her 3 weeks as a janitor, about the things she learned when people thought she wasn't important enough to notice, about the complaints that had been buried, the careers that had been destroyed, the people who'd been made to feel invisible. The question I ask every leader here today is this: do you really know what's happening in your company? Not what your executives tell you, not what's in the reports, what's actually happening day to day to the people who don't have the power to demand your attention. The room was silent. Because if you're not looking, really looking, you're part of the problem. And the only way to fix it is to do what I did. Take off the corner office blinders and see your company through the eyes of the people who are actually living in it every day. The speech went viral. Within weeks, 3 other CEOs announced they were conducting their own undercover assessments. Some worked as customer service representatives, others as warehouse workers or entry-level staff. Not all of them found the problems Elena had, but several did. And they took action. The movement had a name: Eyes Open Leadership. It wasn't about spying on employees. It was about leaders genuinely trying to understand the reality of working at their companies from perspectives they'd never considered. Elena became something of an accidental activist. She didn't want the attention. She just wanted to run her company ethically. But she understood that her platform gave her responsibility. So, she used it. Full circle. 2 years after everything began, Elena walked into the Apex Industries building through the main entrance, as usual. But today was different. Today was the annual company celebration, where they recognized employees for outstanding contributions. She stood at the podium, looking out at the 800 employees gathered in the auditorium. So many faces, so many stories. Today, we're recognizing people who've made extraordinary contributions to our company, Elena began. But before we start, I want to recognize someone who taught me the most important lesson of my career. The screen behind her came alive with a photo. A woman in a janitor's uniform, back turned to the camera, mopping a floor. This is Maria. She's not a real person. She's a character I played for 3 weeks 2 years ago, and she taught me that the most important people in any company aren't always the ones with the biggest titles or the corner offices. Elena gestured to the front row where Rosa sat, her former supervisor from the janitorial staff. Rosa Menendez has worked at this company for 14 years. She manages our facilities team with dedication and kindness. She trains new employees. She solves problems most of us never know about. And for most of our company's history, people like Rosa were invisible. Elena looked directly at Rosa. I'm sorry it took me so long to truly see you. And to everyone in this room, whether you're in engineering, janitorial services, customer support, or the executive team, you matter. Your dignity matters. Your voice matters. The applause started small, then built into something powerful. Rosa was crying. So were several other people in the audience. After the ceremony, Jessica Park approached Elena. The young engineer who'd been pushed to quit now headed up one of their most important product teams. You changed my life, Jessica said simply. When you heard me crying in that bathroom, when you told me not to resign, that was the moment everything shifted for me. I was ready to give up on this industry entirely. Elena hugged her. You changed mine too. Knowing that talented people like you were being driven away, that's what made me realize how bad things had gotten. As Elena walked back to her office that evening, she passed by the janitorial staff preparing for the night shift. She stopped to chat with each one, asking about their families, their day, their concerns. One of the newer janitors, a young man named David, seemed nervous talking to the CEO. But Elena put him at ease. Your work matters here, she told him. If you ever have concerns or ideas or just need someone to listen, my door is always open. Literally. David nodded, clearly surprised but grateful. As Elena finally settled into her office, she looked at the photo on her desk. It wasn't from a board meeting or a conference. It was from her 3 weeks undercover, a selfie she'd taken in the janitor's uniform, her face tired but determined. She kept it as a reminder. Power, she'd learned, wasn't about the title on your door or the size of your office. It was about what you did with that power, whether you used it to lift people up or push them down, whether you saw people for who they truly were or looked past them as if they didn't exist. Elena Rodriguez had built a successful company, but it took becoming invisible to truly understand what success should look like, and she would never forget that lesson. Epilogue. 3 years after her undercover experience, Harvard Business School published a case study on Elena's approach. It was titled, The Invisible CEO, Leadership Through Authentic Understanding. Students debated whether her methods were ethical. Some argued that undercover operations violated employee privacy. Others countered that she was investigating her own company and had every right to understand its culture. But everyone agreed on one thing. Her story had changed the conversation about corporate leadership. Companies started including frontline experience in executive training programs. New CEOs were encouraged to spend time working in different departments, understanding the business from ground level. It wasn't perfect. Some companies did it as a publicity stunt. Others used it as an excuse for performative empathy without real change. But others, many others, took it seriously. They listened, they learned, they changed. And slowly, one company at a time, the culture began to shift. As for Marcus Blackwell, he tried to rebuild his career but found doors closed everywhere. His actions at Apex had become infamous in business circles. No board would touch him. He eventually left the corporate world entirely, a cautionary tale about what happens when power corrupts and hubris blinds. Elena occasionally wondered if she'd been too harsh. Then she'd remember the 23 complaints, the careers destroyed, the young woman crying in a bathroom, ready to give up on her dreams. Number. She hadn't been too harsh. She'd been exactly as firm as the situation required, and she'd do it again in a heartbeat. The message. If you're watching this story from wherever you are in the world, maybe you're dealing with something similar. Maybe you've witnessed injustice in your workplace. Maybe you've been made to feel invisible or less than, or like your voice doesn't matter. Here's what Elena's story teaches us. Change is possible, but it requires courage. It requires people in power to actually care about the people they lead. And it requires all of us to speak up when we see something wrong, even when it's scary, even when we're not sure anyone will listen. Sometimes the person who seems powerless, the janitor, the assistant, the junior employee, might be more powerful than you realize. Treat everyone with dignity, not because of who they might be, but because it's the right thing to do. And if you're in a position of leadership, remember this. Your values mean nothing if the people in your company don't experience them every single day. You can't lead from a distance. You have to be willing to see what's really happening, especially when the truth is uncomfortable. Elena Rodriguez went undercover in her own company because she cared more about doing what was right than protecting her comfort. And that's not just good leadership, that's courage. The question is, would you have that same courage? Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below and let us know. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. We share real stories about real people making a difference, one brave decision at a time. Remember, you never know who's watching. You never know whose life you might be changing with your actions, for better or for worse. So choose better every single time.